So some of you know that I grew up in Tennessee. And for those of y'all who don't know, I grew up in Tennessee. It's where I'm from. I didn't live there for the first 14 years of my life, which is why my accent isn't nearly as thick as some people. But I did live there after I was 14. Both of my parents were raised in Tennessee, in East Tennessee, which is a totally different country from Middle Tennessee and also West Tennessee. So just so we're clear, East Tennessee is where I'm from, around the Knoxville area. And there are many things that I love about being from Tennessee, and I try to go back when I can. But the one thing I told y'all this summer about, I have an uncle who's always bugging me that I don't come to Tennessee enough. I don't come, to see them enough. And one of the reasons is because they're always planning a family trip to Dollywood. Dollywood, if you don't know, is an amusement park that was bought by Dolly Parton. It's, the best place ever. It is a pretty great place, Dollywood, and it's kind of a, temple to Dolly and where she grew up, Dolly Parton, and Dolly Parton herself is a part of growing up in Tennessee. She is a part of things. I didn't know people made fun of her until I got a lot older because she's just kind of a part of life. We had her records, all of them, and I would, actual records, and I would play the records and listen to Dolly as just part of being a kid. And growing up in Tennessee, my dad had a store. He owned a store that one of them was in Pigeon Forge. And so every summer when I was in high school, my brother and I would ride up to Pigeon Forge with my brother, and we'd go to Dollywood, or we'd go to, Dolly now owns a water park. I don't know what it's called, Dolly Water or something like that. But it's, she owns pretty much everything in Pigeon Forge. And so that was a place where I spent a lot of my childhood, was, kind of in the shadow of Dolly Parton. And I love her. I really do. I just kind of unashamedly love her because she is so much herself. And, when she talks about Tennessee, she's totally honest about where she grew up and how she grew up, in a one-room house with 12 brothers and sisters, and how it was, it was kind of ridiculous, but they grew up singing and they grew up with a lot of love and all those things like that. And if you ask, a lot of people have their favorite Dolly Parton songs, and since this is church, and I don't want to lie, I'll tell you my favorite Dolly Parton song, even though it's embarrassing. I love Islands in the Stream. I know it is the cheesiest of cheesy 80s songs. I understand that, but I love it. And I used to play that record, and then the tape, it was one of the first tapes I ever got, was Islands in the Stream, the duet with Kenny Rogers. I mean, that's good stuff. And she still sings it in her concerts. She's kind of reinvented herself over the years, again and again, and you gotta respect that. She's getting close to 70, but she's still touring. She says, anytime something sags, I just have it lifted right up. That's how she's gotten to be where she is. And she'll say that, she's the first one to make fun of herself. When I was growing up, again, in Tennessee, we go back to my grandparents' house, and my grandfather was very, pretty straight-laced. He was a church-going guy. He was a good Methodist, and he would just kind of condemn anything that was, that was going on in the world that he didn't like, but he had a secret. In the garage, where he kept a lot of his stuff, his tools and his paints, he was a painter. We would kind of sneak into the garage, and it was the worst kept secret in my family that behind the door there was a poster of Dolly Parton. And it was the 70s Dolly Parton, so there was a lot of Dolly Parton going on. And she had the short shorts, and she had the tied top, and I mean, it was Dolly, so there was, a lot to see. And that was my granddaddy's, his little sort of secret that we knew he wasn't quite as straight-laced as we thought. When we'd sneak back and see that poster of Dolly literally rolling in the hay was that poster. So, it was just part of growing up, and it is a part of Tennessee. And all of us have our favorite songs, but if you ask Dolly, even to today, in interviews and anything, if anyone asks her, what is your favorite song of yours? If somebody asked me and I had that many hit songs, I don't know, I'd probably say, well, they're all like my children. I can't pick just one, but Dolly doesn't. she has one that's her favorite, that she's consistently said is her favorite from, the 70s all the way up until a few years ago when she had a new CD come out. She says her favorite song, anybody know? Coat of Many Colors. Coat of Many Colors is her favorite song. And she talks about this song as being her favorite song because it reminds her of when she was growing up in Tennessee. And it reminds her of where she came from. And I think part of that song is how she came to be the person that she is. Just unashamed, she is who she is. That song starts when she was growing up in Tennessee, and it talks about how her mother, can you imagine 12 kids in a small cabin, somebody gave her mother out of charity a bag of rags. And so her mother took this bag of rags. Can you imagine how insulting that would be? You have these 12 kids, and what somebody gives you is a bag of rags. But what her mother did, instead of being insulted, she took the rags and she sewed them into a patchwork coat for Dolly. If you go to the museum in Dollywood, you can see the actual coat. It's worth the price of admission to go to Dollywood, and you see the actual patchwork coat that her mother stitched for her. And she says in the song, as she made this coat for her out of the only thing that they had, because it was getting cold and she needed a coat and there were 12 kids and no money, as she stitched this coat for Dolly, and I can't imagine what her mother must have felt like, this kind of despair maybe, but as she stitched her coat, she told her this story from the Bible. Now, of course, there's no TV. There's no radio, there's no anything to do. And so she told her this wonderful story about Joseph from the Bible. And I bet it was pretty entertaining. I imagine her starting it out, no TV, this is their entertainment. I imagine her starting it out, once upon a time, there was a man named Israel. And his name was Israel. It was also Jacob, but it became Israel because he wrestled with God and came away with a blessing. Now, Israel had 2 wives. This is marriage in the Bible. 2 wives. One of them, he didn't want to marry. He was tricked into marrying, and her name was Leah. The other one, he worked for 14 years to be able to marry her because it says his love for her was so great, and her name was Rachel. Now, the story of Rachel and Leah and all of those relationships, that's even better than TV, right? This wife that he didn't really want, but he was married to, and then this other one that he was in love with, that's a story for another day. But what you need to know is that Leah gave birth to 10 children, and Rachel only 2. But Rachel was the wife that Jacob truly loved, and so those 2 children were Joseph and Benjamin, and Joseph, the firstborn of the wife that he truly loved, was really special to him. In fact, it says in the Bible that Joseph was his favorite. You're not supposed to have favorites, especially out of 12 children, but it says this was his favorite, and whether or not it was because it was Rachel's child or because it was a child of his old age, we don't know. But Joseph was his favorite, and so Jacob made him a coat. Now, it says in our translation that it was a coat with long sleeves, but you know that Dolly Parton's mother was reading from the King James Bible because that's the only true Bible, right? And so she would have said to Dolly, it was a coat of many colors. It could mean any number of things, a coat of many colors, a coat with long sleeves, an embroidered coat, whatever it was a coat that was beautiful and special, a coat that was almost fit for a king. And Joseph's brothers were jealous and didn't like that at all. And when Joseph, this snot-nosed little brother, you can see him saying, guys, guess what? I had a dream. And in the dream, there were 12 things, and they were all bowing down to me. And then I had another dream, and in that dream, the sun, the moon, and the stars, 12 of them, they were all bowing down to me. You can see how that might come across badly. You can see how his brothers might start to hate him. One day, Joseph's brothers all went into the field, and they were keeping the livestock, and Joseph went out after them, the tag-along little brother in his super special stripy coat. He comes up to the brothers, and they're so mad at him they want to kill him. They really want to kill him. What they do is they take his super special coat and they tear it. And they take a goat and they put some goat's blood on it. And they throw him into a pit. And they're going to leave him there so that he dies. But one of the brothers, who has kind of a soft spot for Joseph, says, wait, let's not kill him. Let's sell him. There's some Egyptians coming along. Why don't we sell them to the Egyptians so we can at least get some money out of this deal? So they take him out of the pit and they sell him to the Egyptians, and they take this coat, this beautiful special coat that now has blood on it, they take it home to their father and say, we found this coat, we don't know what happened, but it's Joseph's and it has blood on it. And it says that Jacob was inconsolable. This is his favorite son. In the meantime, Joseph is a slave in Egypt. He becomes a slave, and he keeps having dreams. He was thrown into prison for something that he didn't do, and in the middle of prison, which seems to be the worst time in his life, he's having these dreams, and he doesn't know what they mean, and in prison he says, God, help me. Help me use these dreams for good, and good things begin to happen to Joseph. And through a series of events, he works his way up to being the assistant to the Pharaoh, the most powerful person in Egypt. And so Joseph has all of this power, this scorned little brother who was left for dead and sold, and all of these things. He's become one of the most powerful people in Egypt because God is using his prophecy, these dreams, for good now. Egypt has a famine. And Joseph predicts it, and because he predicts it, they're able to store away all this grain, but Israel was not. And so there's one day when Joseph is in his palace, and he sees 12 people coming towards him. He sees them coming towards them, and he knows who they are, but they don't know who he is. They don't recognize him. And he sees his brothers coming towards them, and then he sees all 12 of them bow down at his feet. And he remembers his dream. He remembers seeing the 12 things bow down to him, and he sees it coming true. And it says in the Bible that he has to leave because he's sobbing. He can't believe that this is how it's going to be. And he comes out, and he, of course, he gives the grain to his brothers. He saves their lives and their family's life through this terrible thing that had happened to him. He's able to save their lives many years later. Through the worst thing in his life, God is able to use that for good, to save the lives of Israel, of this nation who Jesus is descended from. I can imagine Dolly Parton's mother telling her this story, and she's finished the coat, and Dolly Parton puts on her coat, and she goes to school with this story sort of ringing in her ears about the specialness of Joseph and how God was able to use him for good. And she goes to school, and it says, I tried to tell them about the story when they made fun of my coat. And you can imagine Dolly Parton with this coat on, that maybe she was acting a little bit special. Maybe she was saying, look at my coat, it is the best thing ever. And she told them the story of Joseph. And it says, of course, they don't understand. Kids can be so mean. It says they don't understand about her coat. But you know, because that's her favorite song, you know that she's carried that with her throughout her life, this story of Joseph and of God using this terrible situation for something good. And I wonder if that was even in her mother's mind. As she sewed this coat out of a bag of rags, somebody's thrown away rags from their kitchen, I wonder if she was thinking about this story, about how God brought something good out of something terrible, and how maybe God was doing that same thing then, and how maybe God does that same thing now. When we're given something in our lives that is terrible, insulting even, a bag of rags, our siblings ignore us and forget us, or whatever that might be, we hear these stories. We have the hope that God can bring a miracle out of the worst of these situations. We don't know how it will happen. We don't know when, but we hear these stories and we have a little hope. I heard another one just the other day. There was a woman in Haiti who had a baby that she could no longer feed. And she went and sat on the doorstep of what she thought was an orphanage. Sat there with her baby because she was waiting for the orphanage to open, and she was going to give her baby to the orphanage in hopes that someone could adopt her and give her a better life. But she wasn't sitting on the steps of an orphanage. It was the steps of an American woman who had come down to adopt a baby 3 years earlier, but had stayed when she saw all the need, and now lives in Haiti, trying to help wherever she can. And when the American woman opened her doorstep and the woman tried to give her her baby, she said, well, why would I pay $20,000, the adoption fee, to adopt this baby when the mother really wants to keep her? Wouldn't I rather try to work to keep them together? And so she looked around at what she could see, at maybe something they could make and something they could sell. And what she ended up doing was starting a business where women in Haiti who would like to stay with their children and make a living for their family, they make beautiful jewelry out of trash. I mean actual trash that you find on the side of the road, cereal boxes, plastic bags, whatever they can find. They make this jewelry that's bought by designers here out of trash. And they can have a better life. They are actually literally saving the lives of themselves and their children from trash, from something that somebody's thrown away. God does this all the time, in these little ways and in big flashy ways sometimes, where God takes a bag of rags, a garbage dump of a situation, and brings new life from that. There's a word for it, although we don't hear it until the New Testament. But it's what God's been up to all along if you look at the big picture. Y'all know this word, and this is what happens when we start looking for it all around, from the bag of rags to a bag of trash to all of these things, God bringing good out of something terrible. It's called resurrection. Amen.